Hey everybody, this is Pierre Quinn, and you're listening to episode number 60 of the Leading While Green podcast, where my mission is to help you live, learn, and lead with confidence. On this episode of the podcast, my guest is Dr. Heather Thompson Day. Dr. Day is an assistant professor of communication at Andrews University. She writes for tons of blogs and magazines. She's the author of 5 books, an emerging expert in the field of communication, and a dynamic keynote speaker. And we talk about how to communicate with this generation and the power of story. So, listen up. Before we jump into the conversation with Dr. Heather Day, I want to thank you for supporting the podcast. I want to thank you for your 5-star reviews on iTunes. I want to thank you for sharing it on social media. Our listenership grows every single month because of your support. And I want to thank you. If you're a frequent listener to the podcast, you already know about my free leadership course, 12 Tips to Help Leaders Grow. And you can find that on my blog, prcquinn.com. At the top, you can click on free course. I also have my Leading While Green intensive. Got 8 power-packed video lessons, deep diving into some of the fundamental principles of leadership. And you really want to take this course if you're transitioning to a major leadership position, or you got somebody on your team that's trying to figure out how to lead for the first time. This course is for them. And you can also find that on my blog, prcquinn.com. Now, we're going to jump into a conversation with Dr. Heather Day about the challenges of communicating with this generation, and also the power of telling your story and how sharing stories build community. So listen up to our conversation. Episode of the podcast, I'm excited to be joined by my good friend, Dr. Yeah, I say that with pride, Dr. Heather Day. How are you today?
I am excellent. Glad to be here.
So Heather is an author, she's a speaker, she's a professor, she's a dynamic communicator, and she teaches at Andrews University. And if you don't know anything about Heather, we'll put all of her information on the show in the show notes so you can connect with her. Heather, how's life at Andrews?
Life has been excellent. So at Andrews, I have the unique ability to be at the most diverse institution in the country, which is something that I'm really passionate about and really enjoy getting to experience all these other cultures.
Okay, so give us a little bit of backstory. You know, how did you get to this point where you're a college professor, you just finished the requirements for your PhD, and you're molding the next generation of leaders? What's the story that led up to that?
Yeah, so when I was in grad school, a teacher of mine told me that she really liked one of my teaching demonstrations and she thought I should be a teacher. And I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life at that point, other than write stories. That's what I knew I wanted to do. And my dad always told me, you need a day job if you want to be a writer. So I took that advice and ended up being an adjunct at a really small community college. And that experience turned out to be really important for me because I adjuncted there for like 3 years with like no pay. And then they hired me on full time. And I stayed there for another 3 years. And then there was an opening at Andrews University, the school where I'd gotten my education from. So I was super excited about that and was able to transition to the university experience, which is totally different than the community college experience. But I think a lot of the legwork and the struggle and having to fight for student attention and the community college realm, that you don't really have that same fight in the university setting, but I think it prepared me to be a better teacher.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know much about higher education, that adjunct position is really, having sat in that seat myself, we're really the unsung heroes of collegiate education. Now, what are some of the other differences between your time at a small community college and now at a major university in terms of the dynamic of teaching?
I think one of the biggest things is the school I was at was really not diverse at all. It was a mainly white population of kind of country kids whose parents would rather them go work at the factory than be in education. So you're constantly fighting this battle of why do I need this? Education, period. And then on top of that, you add, I'm teaching communications, which glossophobia, the fear of public speaking, is like the number one fear in the United States, or at least it used to be. So not only are they saying, well, I don't even need an education, but also, so tell me why I need communication, because I know how to talk. I do it every day. That's what everybody always says, not understanding that communications is about confidence, which is your ability to change your message to fit your audience. And that is not something people typically do every day. And that is absolutely a skill that we have to train ourselves in.
Share with us one of those transformation experiences. Maybe you had a student or a group of students one particular year, and some of them were hesitant, they were apprehensive, they didn't know why they needed the course. But by the time the course was over, they either developed into amazing communicators, or they came to you and said, okay, I get it now. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think every semester for me in community college, I had that experience. I mean, I was constantly trying to do the battle of, why are we here? I think for me, the best skill I ever learned was to not treat them as a class, but to treat them as a group of individuals. So learning students' names was highly important. I started this event that I would do. It was on Saturdays. So having other ways for them to experience a relationship with me outside of the classroom became really pivotal, and it was crazy. So here's one example. One of the speeches I would have students do was they had to take a story from their life and say why that story was symbolic of who they are as a person. And I would have that be the very first assignment they did in public speaking. And it changed every single time without fail. If they shared a story from their life, it changed the entire dynamic of the rest of the semester, because we stopped looking at each other as strangers and started to see each other as unique people whose stories sometimes crossed over with my story, or just was a completely different experience. And please tell me what that was like. And so it created this sense of community, which now, especially as I went on to study stories for like the last 3 or 4 years, I'm able to understand the biological things that were happening as we heard each other's stories, which informed that process.
Okay, so this is part of your dissertation work. Give us some of that doctoral education. What is some of the biology that's taking place as we're listening to each other's stories?
So this is highly fascinating. I tell my students all the time, if you can insert into an interview a short story, when they ask you for an example, tell them a story. It changes everything, because what happens when we hear stories is we release the hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love drug. It's the love hormone. It's what tells you you feel connected to this person. So when a mother has a baby, the first thing they do is put that baby on the mother's chest, and they tell her to nurse the baby, because when she nurses the baby, she releases oxytocin. Oxytocin has her look at that baby and say, you love this baby. You're connected to this baby matters to you. We release the exact same hormone when we listen to each other share stories. Which is so powerful, and I think transformative, especially as a communicator. How do we get to, so in communication, we say the message is never in words, it's always in people, right? So in order to understand the message, I have to know you. And stories are part of that process that allow me to feel connected to you and keep me coming back for more to understand who you are. They did a Stanford study, and they found that even if I give more information in the story, we remember stories up to 22 times better than just facts alone. 22 times better. I am more likely to remember your interview if you share stories with me about who you are than the next guy who walks in.
Okay, so some people may say, okay, well, that's cute, that's college campus stuff, that's young adult stuff. But what about in the professional space when we're talking about mature adults? How have you seen this maybe with your colleagues, maybe in some of the places that you travel and spoken, this same dynamic of the power of story at work?
Yeah, so Carnegie Mellon did a study on this as well. They gave stats of I can't remember what country in Africa it was, but they gave stats on the population there of children and some of the dire things that they were facing. And then they asked people to donate money to that cause. They gave them like $5 or $10 for participating in the study. Right. So people who read the newsletter of the facts donated a certain amount of money. For the other group, they told them one story about a little girl named Rokia. That's it. The people who heard the story of Rokia and what she was experiencing gave double what the people who just read the list of facts about what the entire population is experiencing. So here's the thing. Human beings are wired to live in relationship with other people. The tribe, this is not Christianity. This is evolutionary biology. You are wired to live in relationship with other people. And if that circle of the tribe gets broken, I don't feel safe. And then I expend more energy trying to figure out who's talking about me, who's out for my job, who's out to get me, than I would just on being productive at work. If I know that everybody at work has my back, I feel safe and I use my time being productive. Things that we can do to help people feel safe is to let them know who we are. As human beings, as animals, we are constantly trying to reduce uncertainty about one another in order to feel safe. So when you tell me stories, you can tell me one story about your life. My brain automatically starts inferring other things about who you are, whether or not it's true, it doesn't matter. I create a picture in my brain and I feel safer having lunch with Pierre. I feel safer being at work with Pierre because I think I know who Pierre is, even if I don't. Stories create the illusion that I know who you are.
Well, this idea, this need that we have for safety, talk about the bearing this has on the classroom. We know very well the difference between teaching a class and leading the dynamic experience of a community called a classroom. And what are some of the differences and how does story play a part in that?
Yeah, I think so when we talk about diversity, we often think it's just having a bunch of different people in the room representing different places. And diversity, if it's done well, is not that. It's a bunch of different people from different places in a room validating the experiences of the other people in the room. And when we validate one another's experiences, you absolutely have created a safe space where you are 1000% going to increase productivity. That's just the way it works. We have to feel safe. I have to feel involved. I have to feel included. And I have to feel like the person next to me has my back and cares. That takes time. We can't do that. And the average attention span today is 8 seconds. We can't do that in 8 seconds, right? Studies show that this generation, if a YouTube video doesn't load, if it has a 2-second delay, I X out of the video.
Yep.
So we have an entire generation that says that they don't feel connected. This generation, by the way, is 10 points lonelier than even senior citizens. We have an entire generation that ghosts, deletes, is quick to edit and just quit and on to the next if I don't feel immediately, and we have a fear of rejection if I don't feel immediately included. These things, you have to just tell yourself, I tell my students all the time, this is a journey. There's a mountain and you have to climb it. But it is going to be so rewarding when you get to the top. But you have to tell yourself, I am committed to this journey and it's not going to happen in 8 seconds.
Well, let's talk about that. Getting adapted to culture, this idea of facing loneliness and rejection and transitioning to an academic environment. Each academic institution has its own unique culture. So how did you navigate that at the small community college, at the university level, trying to fit in or adjust, maybe a better word, to the academic culture?
Right. I mean, I think the best way to adjust to whatever culture you're in is to really take time to understand the people who are around you. So for example, in my situation, like I told you, I started a thing where I would meet with students on Saturday mornings at my other college that I was at. Here at Andrews, I have breakfast on Thursdays with whoever wants to come. So on Thursday mornings, I tell them the mantra in the communications department should be nobody has to eat alone unless right? Nobody should have to walk into that cafeteria and say, I don't know anybody here and I'm so uncomfortable and I feel fear right now, right? So I want you to look across that cafeteria and say, oh, there's Mrs. Day. And I can always, there's always a seat at Mrs. Day's table. And when we create those spaces to experience one another, I can't tell you, like I've had students tell me how lonely their college experience has been until we started doing these Thursday morning breakfasts. Right. And symbolic convergence theory says that when we have things like a breakfast, we share stories, of course, because so much of how we relay information is in story inherently. And those stories create fantasy chains that create community. And so that's what we do. And so it's a tiny adjustment. But again, it takes time. I have to commit that I'm going to leave my family and my kids on Thursday morning and go have breakfast with somebody else's kids. Right. I have to do that legwork and put in that time. And It has changed everything though. It changes the way they learn in my classroom, because I'm not just a professor. I'm also the person who I can also sit and have breakfast with her and talk to her about my relationship that's ending.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that would change the way a student would learn? Remember, the goal is always in human interaction to reduce uncertainty and to reduce fear. And so the more I feel connected to that person, the more safe I feel, and the more I am able to focus and be productive on the actual tasks that are available to me, like learning in a classroom.
Now, beside the spoken word, another way to communicate our stories is through the written word. And you're emerging into a pretty prolific author. How has writing impacted your journey and the journey of those around you?
I'm still learning. I think, like my mom just said to me the other day, I just got a new book publication. I just published my 6th book over the summer. And there's a lot of really personal things in there, because a lot of times when you're sitting and you're writing, of course, with technology, we don't always think about the fact that, thousands of people are going to read this.
Mm-hmm,
and my mom's like, is your husband okay with you sharing some of this information that you're sharing? I can't tell you how many times I'll be like picking up my kids from daycare or just at a gas station, and somebody will come up and say, oh, did you write this book? And this person who I don't know about my engagement that I ended 2 months before the wedding. Mm-hmm. So they know intimate details about me that so we skip some steps there. And I think those of us who are interested in writing, you have to be prepared to jump through, the relational development cycle pretty quickly, because other people are far ahead of where you might be as you interact with them. And that's just a really unique experience that I think writers and bloggers and YouTube people and podcasts, that's a unique experience that content creators go through as they start to meet people who are, using the content that they're creating.
So if I'm listening to this podcast, maybe I have an interview coming up, or maybe I have a project, maybe a big presentation, and I'm trying to get a better handle on telling my own personal story and weaving in those narratives, those fabrics of who I am. What are some tips that you have on telling a powerful personal story?
Yeah, I think especially for an interview, it's important to understand the relational development cycle, which says, of course, it should be reciprocal. So I shouldn't share too intimate of details too quickly. If you have not shared those details with me, it creates an imbalance of power and it makes things kind of uncomfortable. However, I can still use the power of story in small ways. So for example, I had a student for that story speech that got up and shared with the class that he was in Little League. And I don't remember what happened. He got hit by the ball in the face, and he was like, I don't want to do this. And he goes up to his dad and he's like, I quit. I don't want to do Little League. And his dad looked at him and he said, no, we are not quitters. You're going to finish it. And so he finished that little semester or whatever that he had to do Little League. Mm-hmm. And he remembered that as he went through college, there are going to be times that I want to quit, but I'm whatever his last name is, I'm a Ferguson, and we don't quit, right? So that tiny little story you could share in an interview. And I've not shared with you anything intimate about myself, but you will feel like I have, because of the hormone release that your body innately goes through just by listening to me tell you a story.
Where do you see yourself as, maybe a few years down the road? You're very young in your career. You're just getting started. If you had to maybe, dream a big dream or cast a big vision on the type of impact that you as a leader and a communicator would want to have on the world, what would it be?
This is something I've been struggling with lately, because for a long time, my biggest goal was just to get a PhD. That was the goal I had visualized in my mind. And I just finished that, right? I just finished that in June. And so now I've been spending a lot of time spiritually and with my family, just trying to decide, okay, what's my goal now? And I think I've been trying to ask God to show me what's important for my life. And I think what I want to do is start developing, taking the communication understanding that I have and trying to develop a platform that can share these things and make academic content applicable to everyday life. Because a lot of times what happens in academia is we have brains in the room who absolutely understand theories, but what they truly can't do is make that applicable to the everyday person in a way that they can understand, right? Because the definition of communication competence is changing my message to fit my audience. And I think, especially some of the time that I spent in community colleges, that's something that's a skill I've really learned. And so I want to continue, developing blogs and articles and books where I can share people some of the things that I've studied for 10 years and give it to you in a chapter or an article or in a blog that you can apply this to your marriage or to your job interview or to your relationship with your parents.
What I love about your response is that it's not a necessarily neat and packaged answer. And before we run out of time, can you talk about the importance of being able to lean into where you're not exactly sure? We have societal expectations that say, okay, by 21, this needs to happen. By 30,
right.
needs to, by 40, this needs to happen. But a lot of us face the uncertainty, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. What's the importance of being able to lean in and embrace those moments of uncertainty?
Let me tell you this. Again, this is why stories are so powerful. So here is a perfect example of smashing the clock. So my Nana, her biggest dream was to have a college education. Black woman, inner city Boston, had 10 kids, raised them all as a single parent. Obviously, at the time that she was, that her available youth years, college wasn't an option for her, and especially when she started having children and then had 10. So what she did was she made sure that every single one of her kids got a college education. Every single one of my Nana's children, all 10 children, got a college education. And then once they were gone and raised and had kids of their own, my Nana at 70 years old said, okay, it's time for me to chase my dream. And she got accepted into Harvard at 70.
Wow.
Here is what I tell people every day: smash the clock, because sometimes the beauty in your story is how long it took you to get there.
That's good.
If my Nana went to Harvard at 30, it'd be like, cool story, bro, but it's not going to change my life. I am telling you, it is only the fact of me envisioning her 70-year-old body walking across a Harvard campus is what gives me goosebumps even right now, and tells me that my dreams never have to die. There is no expiration clock. As long as you're alive, the dream is alive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it takes more time to fulfill it, because sometimes that's what's going to inspire the person next to you to believe that they can do it, is the fact that it took you 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years to get there.
I think you just gave us the title of this episode.
All right.
This episode will be named Harvard at 70. Okay.
Right.
That's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Okay. Before we run out of time, where can we find you? Where are you at on social? Talk about your blogs, where you speaking, traveling. Give us all of it. Shameless plug time.
Yeah, so you can find my website is heatherthompsonday.com. You can always contact me through that. I have a blog that I have with like Mrs. America and a couple other people. It's spilledmilkclub.com. You can find blogs there. I also write for Faithfully Magazine and Christian Woman Magazine. And Twitter, you can find me at Heather T. Day on Twitter.
We will put everything in the show notes. Make sure that you get it. It was a lot. I know you're going to have to rewind, but this was a power packed about 20, 25 minutes. And I need you to follow Heather. I need you to keep up with her. I need you to track what she's doing. Keep up with her on social. She's doing big things and going big places and influencing a ton of people. Heather, thank you for the time. I know the audience is going to be better for it. I've been better for it, and appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one, guys.
Amazing conversation with Dr. Heather Day. And I put all of her information in the show notes so you can connect with her. You can follow up on the work that she's doing. Maybe you can invite her to speak for your organization. I even dropped a link to one of her presentations in the show notes, so you can check that out. She's a really dynamic communicator. Now, again, I want to thank everyone who supports the podcast. And I want to challenge you. I want to challenge all of you who listen to hop over to iTunes, leave a 5-star review, leave some comments, even in the comment section. Put a note on the specific podcast episode that really jumped out at you, that really resonated with you, the specific podcast guest that you felt like you had a connection with that person. Let me know in the show notes. We want to keep bringing quality content and bringing quality individuals on the podcast, but we're going to need you to share it. We're going to need you to share it on your social media. Text somebody, let them know, send them the links to the podcast, and keep pushing out this message of effective leadership, because my mission here is to help you grow. Now, I got some other ways to help you grow, not just the podcast. My free leadership course, 12 tips to help leaders grow. Great course, 4-part video course. You can sign up on my blog, prcquinn.com, sign up for that video course. I also want to encourage you to sign up for my Leading While Green Leadership Intensive. This goes hand in hand with the Leading While Green book. That's available on Amazon, but this is a deep dive to some of the topics in the book. Really intense 8 power-packed video lessons over 2 hours of content, a 48-page workbook designed to help you become more effective as a leader. And the things that I share in this video course are things that I've shared with some of the top companies that I've worked with across the country. I mean, this is top shelf stuff that you want to put in your toolkit, or you want to pass on, you want to purchase and pass on to some of the leaders on your team who need maybe just a bit of a boost or need some retraining in the fundamentals of leadership. This course is for them. Hey, thanks for all the support. That's all we got for this episode of the Leading While Green podcast. And remember, it's our mission to help you live, learn, and lead with confidence. Until next time, take care and God bless.